So does anyone recognize that scene? Does anyone know what we're looking at? Any ideas? Good to see you guys here. I'm sorry that I was about 2 minutes late. I don't think I did too badly considering. But good to see you all here. Someone made a comment that the South is about hospitality. And I've got to say, I think the most outstanding hospitality I received was in the South. Someone sort of gifted me a executive suite in the Hilton. So that definitely does apply. But in terms of true crime and the Murdaught's, what does Southern mean? And that's the first question. The second question is, how does that Southern thing, whatever it is, apply to the Murdaugh case, if it does, or does it not apply? That's sort of the framework within which we're going to approach the Murdaugh case. We're going to go to Moselle. We're also going to go to the scene of the Stephen Smith incident, and we're also going to go to the scene of the Mallory Beach accident, right? And on our way there, we want to try and interrogate this idea of what is Southern, and did that Southernness, did that Southern thing play a role in this case? Another thing just to consider is there another case in which Southernness kind of makes an appearance or seems to play some sort of factor, right? If so, what is that case? Let's see how good your true crime intertextuality, if those rockets are firing. Kathy B says, hi, I'm finally made alive. Good to see you here. Elise, good to see you. Kathy Chase. Kathy says, white male privilege. Bear in mind, I've put a poll up that is intentionally what the poll is. So please try and restrict your, I hate to say this, but try and restrict your thinking to what is in the poll, because I've purposefully chosen what's there because it's relevant to our story. What does it mean to be Southern? Does it mean being rich? Does it mean being poor? The South is about family. 25%, already a quarter of you are saying that. But 3/4 are saying it's about tradition and faith. 3/4 of you say it's about tradition and faith. Let's see what you guys are saying. Lynn says, glad the Hilton treated you right in Charlotte. Thank you. Yeah, it was really good staying there. Mary says, Southern is God, family, and you never meet a stranger. Okay. Laura, it's good to see you. Stephanie L, good to see you as well. Stephanie, I sent you a message not that long ago. Elise says, what's the question? The question is, what does it mean to be Southern, but within the strict confines of the poll that I asked? I suppose you could say whatever's beyond what the poll is, but we're trying to address what happened in the Murdaugh case, but within a geographical, within a regional, within a cultural framework, if that makes sense. Do you understand? D. Patterson says, well, hey, there's regular Southern and there's elite Southern. And so you're talking about, so I mean, wouldn't that then refer to it's means being poor, or it means being rich, or it's about poverty or wealth? Do you think poverty and wealth is at all a factor in the South compared to anywhere else? Well, I see 1% have now touched on being rich, 4% have now touched on being poor. So we are getting somewhere in terms of that. I'm sorry I'm not wearing my normal black attire. It's actually been laundered for $18, if you can believe it. So normally with the coin operated things in the hotels, it's $2 or so, and then $2 to dry. Sometimes it's four. So really, the most I think I've ever paid is $8, $4, and $4. Well, you're in Manhattan, it's more than twice the most expensive thing plus $2. Pretty hectic. What I will do to try and stay presentable. Kat Kruger says, is there more old money in the South? Karina says, I'm fixing to answer the question, though not qualified. Sally says, I'll go with rich in Nepal because of the wealth division of the have and have nots. If you think about it, if being Southern means being rich, well, then for someone else, it means being poor, right? Doesn't it? Well, not necessarily. Carolyn Curry says, I grew up in southeastern Texas, and there it's or was all about family, faith, traditions. Sally says, no more in the north. They were carpetbaggers. Okay. Intercoastal Carissa says, glad I finally caught alive. Can't chat much. So, okay. So I'm going to take you into a couple of videos and pictures, and I'm going to take you into what I really want to talk about in terms of my journey there. So my journey started in Charlotte, and I was quite impressed with Charlotte, kind of at face value. And everyone told me Charlotte's not South Carolina, Charlotte's North Carolina. Well, it's barely in North Carolina. You sort of drive for 5 minutes and then you're in South Carolina. Of course, if you live in South Carolina, it matters. No, I'm not in North Carolina. If you live in North Carolina, it matters that you're not in South Carolina. If you're not from North or South Carolina, it may seem like it's not such a big deal, but obviously when you live somewhere, the cultures and the ideas and everything related to where you live matter very much, and that's really what you want to look at. So some of the first photos I took were just this sort of thing, a mailbox on the side of the road, old mailbox, pretty weathered, and I was trying to capture that windy road in the background. And it wasn't actually let's make this a little bit bigger. It wasn't really the mailbox that I stopped my vehicle for. I mean, I don't think I even saw the mailbox. It was actually, I just want to take a photo of that sign, South Carolina. I'm now in South Carolina. This is the road that I'm following. And if you look at the sort of the branding on the sign, can you see it's kind of emphasizing the trees and the night, I guess, the moon. And you kind of already get a sense that South Carolina's different. Is it romantic? Why is the moon part of this? You know, it certainly gives it a different vibe, doesn't it, to many other states? If I think of Utah, I think about arches and orange rocks. South Carolina kind of has a blue vibe to it here. And is that accurate? And if you just think about this board and the color shirt that Alex Murder was wearing, you know, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Okay. So that was the road I was on, the South 321. And I was surprised that the traffic was as heavy as it was. And I was also surprised that the South wasn't as heavily populated as I thought it might be. There were a couple of big cities and otherwise quite small towns. There's another mailbox that I sort of stopped to. Oh, I actually think that's the same mailbox from a different angle. You kind of got to wonder what these mailboxes have seen. Zircon says the Deep South has a lot of original immigrants. Kat says, I love how Nick says moon. Do I say moon in a funny way? Mel says South Carolina brings to my mind the movie Steel Magnolias. Well, that's already telling a little bit about the relationship the Southern women have with one another, right? Also, how are Southern women and Southern men different to other American men and women? I'm not quite sure what that means, blue vibe in a red state, but it's an interesting comment. Amy says, I lived my life up north and then moved to the south. A culture shock is enough to send you running. Um, I experienced some of the culture and some of it I liked. Those in the member forum will know what I'm talking about. So that is the vehicle I was actually driving. I didn't really mean to be in such a big vehicle. But somebody made the comment that in the South, people do things on kind of a big scale. Is that true? Is that true? In the South, people do things. People are very generous. People do things on a grand scale. Would you say that that is accurate? Yeah, I mean, I wanted a Cherokee. I wanted to drive a Jeep. I didn't know I was going to be getting a Grand Cherokee. So some of you are saying yes, that is true. Is grandness is grandness a feature of the South? You know, I think one way of asking that question is the Southern accent kind of grand or even grandiose? What do you guys think? Is grandness a feature of the South? What do you guys say to that? Some of you say, Kathy says grand, large, big, everything. There's just a picture of me. I think it's so I was wearing a shirt I bought at the Griffiths Observatory and just within the whole rocket science thing. And there's a crossroads. And I was just paying really attention to just the fabric, railway lines, farm, farm fields, lots of trees. But let me ask you a quick question. Um, what relevance does a railway line have in the story? Grand mansions, yeah. So can you see we're already talking about things that are related to the pole? So if things are about being grand, does it mean, well, you've got to be rich or you've got to show you're rich? In other words, if you're rich, must you really go to a lot of effort to show that? Um, And do you remember? So I asked you guys a question earlier. What other case can you think of that in that involves southernness in some way? Let's do a quick check to see if you guys have got any thoughts on that. Can you think of another high-profile true crime case that involves southernness? Let's see what you guys say. Mel says it's appearances that count. Well, there you go. Absolutely. Well done, Wolfie. And Laurie actually gave me this magazine. Um, and you can see that it says right at the top, Ramsey's changed their story, right? And you remember in the ransom note, the words were, don't John, use that good old Southern common sense of yours. Remember that? All right, so the Ramses, well, certainly Patsy was kind of a southerner, right? So I don't know if you can see that if I show it to you here. Um, can you see it? The words about common sense. Can you see it near the bottom there? Can you see that? don't underestimate us. John used that good Southern common sense. Do you guys see it? Right? So if we think about Southernness, and I mean, it's you can say, well, in my opinion, it's that. And then you say, well, in my opinion, it's that. We're trying to decide what it is. We're not going to say it is that. We're simply trying to make up our minds, well, is it this? Is it that? Is it still becoming what it is? But if we take Patsy Ramsey as an example, she was very showy. She was very, what's the word? There's a lot of pageantry in what she did. She was also very, tried to create community. She was also very aware of her own power and wealth and prestige, I guess. And God is very important to her. Family was very important. And I guess being rich was also quite important to the Ramseys, wasn't it? And yeah, there is something like Southern charm, right? Okay. If you think about the Ramsey home, the Ramsey home in a way was like this old house in Boulder. So there's also something Southern about history and legacy, isn't there? Uh, Kayla Langer says, very late, but I'm here. Any way to get an autograph? Thanks a lot. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to get you an autograph. I've been right through America, so if you want an autograph, I was around. Laura says, Betsy reminds me of a damsel in distress. Okay. Eliza says, charm and good manners. Mary says, racism is part of it. And I think that's quite a interesting thing to say, because when you talk about racism, you're talking about discrimination. You're talking about some people looking at other people in a discriminatory way, right? And is that what the Murdaught's did? Did they look at other people? It doesn't matter what race they were, and think I can take advantage of you. In other words, was discrimination part of that story? Is discrimination a Southern thing? And Barry, you might say, I really don't like you talking about that. I'm from South Africa. So if you say, is discrimination a South African thing? I would say, unfortunately, I think it is, right? You get what I'm saying? And then the question is it part of the fabric of this case? Well, we'll try and find out. Some of you are talking about superiority, social class. Is there a social class thing in the South? One solved mystery says Paula Woodward wrote some good books on the John Bonet case. I think if you've read Paula Woodward's books, you will hate my books. I think you will really not want to read any of my books. Okay. Okay, so let's look at the poll again. We see it means being rich is now 2%. Just think about Stephen Smith and his family, right? And the Murdaught's. Has that got anything to do with one group being rich and another group being poor? The South is about family. The South is about tradition and faith. Well, how is family different to tradition and faith? Is it different? Okay, so let's continue. I'm going to take you guys through just a couple of additional pictures here. Oh, so I was asking the question, what relevance does a railway have in this story? So I'll leave you guys to just think about that a little longer. I really don't know why there's a sound of water, like water, um, in my. I just sort of hear that sound. I don't know if you guys can hear it. What relevance does a hotel? What relevance does a railway line have in this story? Susan says, which John Benet Ramsey book of yours should I read first? I would say Christmas Star. In regards to the Ramsey case, the back land went down. The house was on 3 levels. Okay. Wolfie says, I've really loved having you visit us in America and everything you've shared. Thanks so much. I appreciate that. Okay. What relevance do railway lines have in the murder story? So I actually stopped to take a photo of this little house. It looked like quite a nice little house when I like stopped very quickly, but I later decided it's not really that pretty. So I took a couple of photos of the house. I don't know if it was a shed or what it was supposed to be, but it's sort of becoming taken over by nature. And I saw quite a lot of homes that were flattened by falling trees that were just rotting and becoming, I don't know, a mush of wood. And then I saw some incredible mansions that looked like a festival of white picket fences. I mean, just white pillars and sort of white picket railings, and really quite something. So the reason I was taking so many photos of this little house was trying to turn something that was not really worth it into something. And anyway, and so I found this sign as well. Just a little bit of, again, contradiction. Welcome to North in South Carolina. And there were a couple of strange towns like Denmark. What's the other one? I don't know, towns called Denmark, which are very northerly European. So it's like you're in South Carolina and their towns named after very northerly. So I was like, what are you trying to say? Where are you trying to be? And then I ate here at the Piggly Wiggly, and first time I'd ever seen this particular store in America. I don't know if there are other Piggly Wigglies. And this was how they were sort of celebrating Memorial Day. Sarah says, I love seeing America from the eyes of someone who is from somewhere else. Me too. Okay. So yeah, so I kind of I just wanted to show you a picture of this sign, another sign just of, see there, Norway north, or Norway that way, Denmark that way, and just like, wow, we're in South Carolina and there are these very northerly names for towns. I just thought it was quite interesting. So obviously, while I'm in South Carolina, I'm trying to figure out what is going on here. How is this place different? And I'm not even at Moselle. I'm on my way to Moselle, but on my way to Moselle, I'm trying to figure out how things are different here. And I'm actually sort of taking notes. I'm feeling things, I'm experiencing things, I'm noting things all the time. But before I tell you what those things are, I want you to get a sense of that as well. Again, the question is, what does it mean to be Southern? How is being Southern different? Does it mean being rich? Does it mean being poor? Is it about family? Is it about faith or tradition, or is it about something else? So that's what I ate at the Piggly Wiggly, and then off I went, and that's kind of what you see a lot in South Carolina. Just a lot of trees, a very forested part of the country. And as so yeah, you are going to see a really beautiful. Here is a really beautiful house in the middle of the woods. Look at this. I'm going to pause it so I can show you. Just put it in full screen. And again, I want you to think about the question: Is being Southern about wealth, being rich, or being poor? And I've got to say, I saw some incredibly beautiful houses in the South. Let's go on. Is Does it mean being rich if you live in the South, or does it mean being poor? Look at that house, and then look at the house next to it, and the next house across the road. So, do you agree that asking the question in the first place, is being in the South or being Southern about being rich or about being poor? Well, it kind of is a question, because the wealthy people do seem pretty wealthy, and the poorer people seem kind of poorer, relatively speaking. There seems to be quite a strong divide either way. Do you agree with that? And again, you have a similar situation in South Africa. Wealthier people seem obviously wealthier, and poorer people seem obviously poorer. The sort of middle ground is sort of less present. Carolyn Curry says being rich poor is subjective. Well, if you're rich, do you want to show that you're rich? That's kind of what I'm getting at. Pancake says, so glad you're visiting my part of the world. Beverly says, pecans, peaches, gator. Okay. Marianne and me says, yes, a divide. Katie says, well, that's anywhere. Okay. Wolfie says, I love the South, but I'm scared of the snakes. I saw some pretty interesting spiders when I was there. HCK says, my impression is that a lot of Southern people care about their reputation. And again, you've got to ask, does that impression have a bearing on the Murdaugh case? Also, does that impression have a bearing on the Ramsey case? So if you care about your reputation, something happened to your little girl, are you going to be more inclined to hide that away, or are you going to be inclined to deal with it, or what? Like, what's going to happen? Susan says, I was engaged to a Southern man. He was more courteous. His family treated me well. He passed away. He was moderately wealthy. So, what was quite interesting when I met Laurie, one of the supporters of this channel, she kind of described me as a gentleman. And I don't know if I've been described that way anywhere else in America. And I appreciate that description. Um, at my school in South Africa, we were called, like the way that we were referred to when we were referred to by our teachers was gentlemen, stand up, or gentlemen, class dismissed, or whatever. And so, definitely is something that's kind of a compliment. But it's obviously a very, very much part of the way that American Southern women see or want to see men. in the South and the way American Southern men perhaps want to see themselves, right? Sarah says honor and violence. Okay. Uh, Hilarious too says it's the same as everywhere. People go for wealth and power. Is it the same though? Is it the same? Katie says most rich people have big houses everywhere in the world. Really? So I while I was preparing for this live, I thought I would just Google what does it mean to be Southern. You guys can do the same thing. I just let's see what Google says, right? Can you guys see that? What does it mean to be Southern? And the first thing it says was Southern United States is a region in the United States. And it says the Southern United States is a geographic and cultural region. It's geographical and cultural. It's cultural and geographic. It's between the Atlantic Ocean and the Western United States. So the Colorado is not really part of that area. It's sort of just it's almost like being southern is also southeastern. If that makes sense. Then, if you sort of go down a little bit, it says, well, the physical characteristics are that it's also humid, it's subtropical, there's hot summers. Um, the weather, so it's got a very temperamental climate compared to the rest of America. And then this is something that's kind of surprising. So one of the idiosyncrasies of the South are the physical characteristics. And then it says disadvantages. What's the disadvantage of living in the South? And it says one of the main weaknesses was their economy. I'm just reading what it says on Google. And it says they did not have factories like those in the North. They could not quickly make guns and other supplies that were needed. The South's lack of a railroad system was another weakness. So you kind of get the sense that in some broadly economic sense, this part of America kind of struggled a little bit compared to the rest of America in certain economic areas. There were less factories, and the railroad system wasn't as developed. And what's the other thing? It does have a little bit of a tricky geography. There's a lot of sort of swamps, a little bit like the Netherlands, which is where my family's from. Swamps, and it doesn't have a regular coastline to some extent, and that can make things tricky. Roads, bridges, farms, infrastructure can be quite tricky. I've also heard that, and I could be wrong about this, but Walmart doesn't have a presence in South Carolina because of suing laws or because of the laws for personal injury or something like that. That's something I heard. I don't know if it's true, but that is definitely something that I can tell you. When I was driving into South Carolina, I was immediately aware that on the radio, on billboards, advertised on the side of houses sometimes, were sort of personal injury type marketing efforts. And I thought, wow, that's pretty crazy. This crime or this case is to do with a personal injury lawyer and a personal injury law firm. And then that impression of that aspect certainly didn't go away. When I was in my hotel room, the television ads that I was getting sort of peppered with, every second or third or fourth one was a personal injury um, ad. Funnily enough, one of the movies I happened to see while I was in the South is about a personal injury case, the Rainmaker John Grisham, the case that made me stop pursuing law, actually. And that is where I guess a Southern law firm called Great Benefit, their policy was to take advantage of their clients. I don't know if you guys remember that case. And so while I was driving through South Carolina, I would hear ads, for example, from Morgan and Morgan, who would say, they would say, we've got an army of 800 lawyers, and we're going to put at your disposal. And I think they said they're the biggest personal injury law firm in America. I think that's what they said. And then they said, when you have brain surgery, why would you tend to have a team around you? You'll have a surgeon and you'll have, I don't know what else, but whatever. And then he said, well, when you have an accident, you also need a team around you. And you just realize that personal injury is a massive industry in South Carolina. And that's kind of weird. It's weird. Like, so people make money out of other people in South Carolina. People make money out of the misfortunes of other people in South Carolina. It's kind of like, wow, so you've got this sort of sense that you must be a gentleman and people are well behaved and well mannered, but then you've got this really predatory system, kind of a legal system, which is kind of strange, isn't it? Never got a chance, yeah. Shoes are being reviewed, says Morgan and Morgan in Florida, billboards everywhere, yeah. Interesting. There you go. So can you see we haven't even gotten to Moselle, and we're already learning a heck of a lot before we've gotten there. Wolfie says maybe they found out from the murders how much money they could make. Or maybe the murders found out from someone else. Brooke says big bucks in those suits against the insurance companies. So can you see how the first two poll questions aren't that stupid after all? The questions are, what does it mean to be Southern? Well, doesn't it mean being rich? That you can sue someone and you can make a lot of money, and shouldn't that be what you do? And so if you think about that aspect, just in terms of the law, this law where you can make these personal injury cases and make a fortune out of it, is that about family values? Is that about tradition? Is that about faith? Is that about being moral? Right? Something else that was quite interesting was I stopped at a roadside stall and I asked them if they had peach flavored beer. And they said, well, we don't have a liquor license. And I believe that the South also took longer to get rid of prohibition, which is quite interesting. In other words, that the law was harder to laws that people didn't want were harder to get rid of in the South, which I think is quite an interesting idea given the subject matter of the Murdaugh case, right? Okay, let's go back to my journey. I want to play you that last video just one more time. Have a look at these houses. And now look at this one with columns. And look at the one next to it. And do you think the house with columns is trying to say something? You think he's trying to say, I'm rich? Or do you think he's not trying to say anything? Christina says the South is steeped in hypocrisy. Well, we certainly know the Murdaugh case feels very seems like there's some hypocrisy there. Gloria says my computer is acting up. Okay. So I found this water tower quite interesting. This was Bamberg. Does anyone know the relevance of Bamberg? Anyone know the relevance of Bamberg? Uh, Anyone, any ideas? That was something else that I saw along the road that I didn't kind of expect. It's like kind of an abandoned car. There's the windows still kind of open. There's like a creeper growing up the car and in the wheels. and there's a creeper sort of growing into this building and sort of coming out the walls, and it's just like, wow, okay, you know, a little bit surprising just seeing that. And you must bear in mind when I say that, I'm not trying to be funny. I'm in America, and I've been very impressed all along that, like, I feel like I come from a third world country with elements of the second and first world, but basically I feel like I come from, to some extent, a third world country, and I've been saying it, it's really good to be in a first world country. It's good to be, and right now I'm in Manhattan, New York, and I mean that really feels like the first world, right? But the reality is, not all of America is super wealthy, and not all of America is sort of the first world, although a lot of it is. What's sort of surprising is that even in a powerhouse, like a powerhouse economy, a powerhouse country like America, you have this sort of thing. It's just reality. And so at this point, I was just 31 miles from Hampton. That scene that you've just seen now, with the car, just abandoned there, that's just 31 miles outside Hampton. In other words, we are about to enter the fiefdom of the Murdaughs, right? And in other words, we're about to enter the sort of kingdom of this incredibly rich dynasty. And you're already seeing signs of poverty that are kind of standing out. It's like, whoa, okay, I see that. And every now and then I'd find a house with a tree had fallen like on the house, and it seemed like the people had just abandoned the house. Um, yeah, just quite strange. And so I noticed this tower. Let me ask you guys again the question: what significance does Bamberg have in our story? Misa Mom says there are many depressed areas in the US. There's a lot of poverty in the world, period. Okay. But there's comparatively less in America, is the point. So, Wolfie, what is quite interesting when I was traveling with Laurie was she was saying, well, what does poverty look like in South Africa? And I said, well, you wouldn't have a house and you wouldn't have a car, you would have a tiny little shack. And the people in that shack wouldn't have a job, and there might be 8 or 10 people living in that shack. And in other words, the poverty is much worse, and it's far more dire, right? In America, the unemployment is, what is it, 3%? In South Africa, it's upwards of 30%. So the poor in South Africa are a lot poorer than the poor in America. I would even say the rich in South Africa aren't nearly as wealthy as the wealthy people in America. Well, unless you are Elon Musk. Okay, so what does someone say about Bamberg? There you go. Um, Stephen, there is a Stephen Smith tied to Bamberg. I think his mother lives there, moved there. That's as far as I remember. That's the time of Bamberg. Okay, let's continue. So, I mean, I just got out my car to take a photo of that road sign, and that's when I saw this big tower. And that sometimes happens. You sort of fortuitously come upon a scene, and it really stands out to you. And what I found just quite interesting was the um, the proportion of this big water tower and the small little church next to it. Right? Can you guys see that that is a church? I just thought it was quite interesting that you had this small, modest little church, right? And it was sort of in a way dwarfed by just an ordinary water tower. And again, that comes back to one of the questions, what does it mean to be Southern? And one of them is, well, it's about tradition and faith. And so you kind of have this, and what I think I'm trying to convey with this image is already the psychology of you've got some good people in the South, people who are God-fearing, people who are trying to live decent, honest lives, right? And yet, in a way, that goodness is being dwarfed by some other structural thing. And in this case, it's the sort of legal structure, the whole personal injury thing that is designed to do whatever it is, but someone's appropriated it and they're using it, I guess, in some way to make themselves rich. Right? That's that kind of psychology that I'm trying to what's the word? I'm trying to um, find a line into that. Trying to intuit that sort of psychology. And so I just thought that this is quite amazing. Just this small little building, a church with this massive structure right next to it. And look what a beautiful day it was. You've got these fluffy clouds, beautiful day, and yet there's something ominous in what you're seeing here, something unvoiced. And this wasn't really easy to get to. I had to climb through a ditch to get the right perspective. And anyway, so that was just what I was trying to convey with that. So I took quite a few pictures of it. And I guess in a way, that little video clip is to some extent emblematic of the Murdaugh dynasty versus all the other people in their little community. The housekeeper, the all the people that sort of ended up being part of that those 100 um, what's it called, 100 crimes or whatever things that he was accused of. And so now it is on to the Hamptons and on to Moselle. So now we're getting quite close to Moselle, and this is what it looks like in that sort of area. There are no mountains, the roads are flat, and something else just to take note of, and it's quite interesting that somebody said this to me, that please make sure you're not on the road at night, right? And the reason is because in the day it's perfectly fine. There you have a nice little road through the woods. And of course, what's the difference between this road during the daytime and this same road at night? What's the difference? Let me ask that again. What's the difference between this nice, perfectly fine road during the day? There's nothing difficult about it. It's a straight, flat road with woods on the side. What's the difference between that road during the day and that road during the night? Well, there you have it. Absolutely no lights. It's pitch dark. It's not only dark, it's like completely dark, and yeah, it's you're kind of on your own, right? Pitch black. Yeah. And you kind of in a so if your car breaks down there or something happens, you kind of in someone else's country in a way. And I don't mean you in America. I mean you in someone's country inside America, if that makes sense. And it happens to be a family called the Murdaughs. So let's go on a little further. we're getting closer and closer to Moselle. And this is exactly what I was talking about. Every now and then you'd find something really bizarre. You'd, like, Yara found a tree had just fallen onto a house. And I don't know, it seems like it had just been sort of left that way. The tree fell on the house, and I mean, this looks fairly recent. Did they then just abandon the house? I don't know. Did somebody collect insurance for that? So something else you maybe want to keep an eye out, just in a clip like that, is we're quite close to Moselle, and we are now starting to drive um, onto the same road that Alex Murdaugh would have driven after committing the murders, right? The murders that he was convicted of committing. And so the question is, okay, so tell me a little bit about those roads. Like, what is your impression of those roads? And here is my feedback on that. So the first thing to say is some of the heaviest traffic I experienced in America was in South Carolina during the Memorial Day weekend. So I was all over America. I was in California. I actually drove through parts of LA eventually. But thanks a lot for that, Karina. Right. But I can definitely say to you that the traffic that I experienced um, along the coast to Beaufort and from Charlotte to Savannah and all along there was some of the heaviest traffic that I experienced in America, right? And I was also given a warning. Laurie said, just be careful. There's a lot of traffic on the roads, and also there's a lot of police cars on the road as well. There's right. And I can tell you, as soon as you left those roads and you went down a road like this, there was almost no traffic whatsoever. There was like very, very minimal traffic, even when the rest of the highways were really busy. So even at a period where the traffic's really busy, these roads are really, really empty. It's quite astonishing. Yeah, that's right. But can you are you getting the sort of counterintuitive irony here? It's like, well, you would expect even these roads to be fairly busy because everyone's heading to. Well, actually, they're not. These roads are unexpectedly quiet, and that then brings you to the point where you say, when Alex Murdaugh committed the crime and he drove from A to B and then back to A, do you think he expected to be seen? Do you think he was he driving down busy roads? Do you think there would have been any eyewitnesses? Do you think there would be any sort of cameras, like the cameras that you get on I don't know, malls and gas stations? Would you have that sort of infrastructure that's sort of capturing his journey? Would you have any of that? So that's really the point, is that he could commit a murder, a double murder, and then go somewhere else, set up his alibi, and then return and nobody would see him, and his alibi could eventually stand unopposed. Does that make sense what I'm saying to you? In other words, the fact that it's so what's the word, empty, such an empty landscape, such a dark landscape, and that you can drive from one point to another late at night and not be seen means that your story can stand unopposed because there's nobody there to see you. That is 100% right. But you only learn that by going there, right? You only establish that as a fact and as reality by going there, right? And so, although that's true, this was also true. Where did somebody say that? His phone caught him out. Okay, so let's continue. Can you see I'm not seeing a single car here? So another thing that was quite charming and quite interesting was you drive and there'd be literally nothing, no houses, no towns. And then in the middle of nowhere, there'd be a church. And then not that far away, like a couple of miles further down, there'd be another church. So in other words, a church, no houses in between, and then another church, and so on. And so when we ask the question, what does it mean to be Southern? Well, one part of that is definitely faith. I don't know if there's a statistic that shows that there are more churches per capita in South Carolina. I don't know if there is something like that. I think I'm going to just quickly Google it. Which state has the most churches? I wonder what the answer is. Mississippi. Okay, well, that is Southern. Which state has the highest population of Christians? Okay, so which I want to just see a list of states with the most churches per capita. See what we get with that. So what is the least church state in America? And that is New Hampshire and Vermont. So there's the church belt, and then there's also the unchurched belt. I don't know if you've heard about that. So which states are very religious? So yeah, they are Alabama, 77%, Mississippi, 77%, Tennessee, 73%, Louisiana, 71%, and what's after that? Arkansas, 70%, and then South Carolina. So South Carolina is not the most religious state, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's 6. Let's just show you. So you guys agree that this is just kind of quite an interesting discussion. So most religious states, so Alabama, South, Mississippi, South, Tennessee, Louisiana, Arkansas, then it's South Carolina, then in West Virginia, and that's the state where Patsy Ramsey was from. She was Miss West Virginia. Then Georgia, I was in Georgia as well. Georgia's logo is the peach. Oklahoma, and then North Carolina. So North Carolina is actually slightly less religious than South Carolina. I find that also quite interesting. In fact, you could say North Carolina is, to some extent, significantly less religious than South Carolina. I mean, North Carolina is not just like one below; it's 1, 2, 3, 4 below, right? By the way, something that I read that's just quite interesting is America is one of the richest countries in the world that is not a particularly secular country. So there tends to be a relationship between wealthy countries and countries that are, I guess, irreligious. But America actually bucks that trend. It's actually a exception, which is quite interesting. California, so if you want to look at California, is at 49%. I don't know what, there's Oregon, 48%, Washington, 45%, um, Colorado, 47%. What's that? South Dakota, 59%. Montana, 48%. Texas is also a fairly religious state, as well as, well, there's Louisiana. Let's have a look at these states. New York, 46%. Connecticut, 43%. Massachusetts, 33%. New Hampshire, 33%. Vermont, 34%. Maine, 34%. It's almost like the further south you go, the more religious people seem to become. And yeah, south, this sort of area, this sort of area. Anyway, if you want to have a look, then just check it out. I did put the link over there. So let's go back to our photos. I thought this is a beautiful little church. I went to the Methodist church as a kid, and this little Methodist church just in the middle of nowhere. This beautiful white building in the woods, essentially. And you see the moon next to the steeple. Can you see how it's a church in the middle of nowhere? It's not next to a town. There are no houses next to it. And so these are some of the big estates, beautiful farms. You've got these big estates, and then tiny little houses somewhere, and then churches as well. And it's very different to Indiana, where all the little farms seem to be about the same size, right? So I've just showed you like this big estate, and then you have these little kind of shacks here and there. I'm not sure what that's, and then also these churches that that you get sort of in and out of the forest here and there. So can you see when I asked the question, does Southern mean being rich or does Southern mean being poor? Can you see what we're already seeing is you'll see like a really big estate, and then you'll see small little houses, and then a really big estate, small little houses. You'll even see, like I showed you earlier, sort of fairly kind of ordinary house and then kind of a big house. And then so there seems to be quite a radical change between or difference between rich and poor, right? And so you might say, yeah, but rich and poor is totally normal all over the world. Rich people live in big houses, poor people live in poor. It's actually not like that. In certain countries, you have what's called the Gini coefficient, where the divide between rich and poor is greater. In other words, the rich are richer and the poor are poorer. Whereas in a country like Australia, which is a very egalitarian society, that the rich aren't much richer than the middle class, and the poor are not much poorer than the middle class. The middle class is basically what who you'll be, whether you're a doctor or a teacher, whatever it is, right? And I actually met a South African lady with an Australian son, if that makes sense. She had her son in Australia, and I said, "What do you think of America?" To the Australian kid, and he said, "You know what? I think I prefer more he said, "I prefer Australia because it's a more egalitarian society." And I didn't really know what to think about that. Um, I'm still trying to make up my mind what I think about that. I mean, what I love about I've just taken a boat cruise to the Statue of Liberty, and one of the great things about America is it's a land of opportunity, and so you have the freedom, you have the opportunity to make yourself financially unequal to the person next to you. I'm talking about you. If you work really, really hard, you can, improve your life to a certain extent. And I think it is the fact that you can work really, really hard in certain countries and get nowhere. Whereas if you work really, really hard in America or for American companies, you can kind of get rewarded for that in ways that you can't really in other places. I'll give you a really good example. An Uber driver, the guy who took me from LaGuardia into Manhattan, he was saying, I'm just telling you what he told me. He said, you can earn six figures working as an Uber driver. And he actually dropped out. He was working, I don't want to say in banking, but he was in some sort of corporate position. And he's a very well educated, very well spoken guy. And he was saying that he quit his job and went back to driving Uber because he said how much you can earn, certainly in the New York area, if you work hard, if you work 10-hour days, 60-hour weeks, I think. And I thought that was really quite interesting. And then I told him I was a YouTuber, and he said, "Oh, you're only the second YouTuber I've met. Someone who's like So what I'm trying to get at is it's not quite as simple as that, where the rich are obviously rich. Um, in South Carolina, it does seem like there's a clear divide. There's not like a middle ground so much, if that makes sense. Yeah, yeah. Okay. By the way, Helena, I got some beautiful photos of the New York skyline from the boat that I took to the Statue of Liberty. It was really quite something. Elijah says, I love all the Australians I ever met. That's good to hear. Okay, so let's continue. So now we are getting closer and closer to Moselle, right? And before we get to Moselle, we're going to Hampton. I just want to make sure what the sign said. I think it did say Hampton. What does the sign on the right say? Beaufort 63. That's important to remember because uh, Paul went from home to Beaufort, basically. That's where he sort of took the boat and everything. So you also want to know what's going on in Beaufort, right? So something else I've got to tell you is I uh, I kind of had a little bit of an experience with a logging truck. So you might say, so what are the idiosyncrasies of traffic in South Carolina? And one of them is that there are logging trucks that, because there are trees all over the place, they cut the trees down and they load them onto trucks, and so they're logging trucks on the road, right? And at one point, I was driving behind a logging truck, and the logs were jiggling a little bit, and there were little flags on the back logs. But I was definitely conscious of the fact that the logs weren't completely in line with the truck, that they would extend quite far beyond the back of the truck, and that they could sort of do that a little bit, right? And that is something that is fairly unique. It's definitely not the only place in America where you have that, but it's a place in America where you have that, I think, a bit more than average. And so, yeah, we are entering Bamberg County. Or I think I was actually exiting Bamberg County. And so there you have a just further confirmation that one of the things that South Carolina's got to deal with that a lot of other states don't have to deal with as much are storms, or things like hurricanes and bad weather. And so now we're going into Colleton County. Is Colleton County relevant to the case that we're dealing with? What do you guys think? So this was going in. This was the road into Colleton County. And now we are very, very close to Moselle. And you can see this is even less of a secondary road than the secondary road we were just on. This road doesn't really even have lines on it. I'm not quite sure why that was there. Again, do you see how empty these roads are? That looks like a might be a car over there. I think this is like this is within a mile from Moselle. And so there you have it, 2.2 miles, and it's quite close to a railway line, right? So this is the sort of fabric we really want to know about. What does the road really look like in this sort of area? There's a rail crossing. There's a little bit of a scrabble of houses here, and then again, not very much after that. Continue. So that this was also remember that this was also close to the area where Maggie Murdaugh's phone was found, just thrown into the woods, right? As far as I know, it's on the left-hand side of the road, not that far from Moselle. By the way, thanks very much, Haunting Haley. What do you say? South Carolina, Midland, Low Country native. All of our roads are awful, but these narrow, empty roads are country roads, back roads. I don't think your roads are awful at all. They're not bad. Some of them are quite narrow. My stay was great. Thank you very much. Linda says, I'm not surprised that Maggie preferred the beach. Sally says, I see there's the side of greed and there's the side of earn what you have. Okay, so here we go. Why are we upside down? I don't know why we're upside down with the Moselle Road, but there you go. Ever seen it upside down? Let's see if I can fix that. That's kind of embarrassing. Uh, it doesn't seem to offer me that option. Sorry, guys. Yeah, upside down. Do you want to watch it again upside down? If you're watching this on your phone, just turn your phone around. No, it definitely wasn't on purpose. So the thing that's quite interesting here is that there's actually no fence here, right? There's no fence there, and there's no fence there, right? And so, in other words, if you wanted to, you could, I guess. Uh, I don't really mean that. I don't mean like if you want to, you could trespass. I just mean if somebody wanted to get through there, it would be possible. It wouldn't be legal because it would be trespassing, and you've got all of these signs saying that. And of all the places I've been to in America, I think this one is the most like strident. Like, do not cross this line. You're trespassing. And there's actually even a camera. I'll show you it in a moment. There's a camera like on the gate that was actually, I guess, watching and recording and whatnot. I'll show you that in a moment. And then you could actually see the dog kennels if you parked over there. You look down the road, you could actually see the dog kennels, right? So this is actually what it, and I purposely took the photo like this. You often see photos just going that way, but you don't often see what it looks like on the other side. But again, you can see this would be a very dark road at night and a road that nobody would go on at night. Not quite sure what that was all about. Anyway, that's the front of the gate, and you can see there's a camera right there. That's the camera. And they do say that there's a camera. They say video surveillance in use, violators will be prosecuted. And there are 4 signs really reinforcing that, right? There's another one, and another one, and another one over there. And can you see that that's the attempt? Just a little bit of tape over there. But there's not actually a fence here. You know, there's a line of trees, but there's not really. There's a bit of a gate. I'm not sure what they call this, but there's the gate, and then what's the proper term for this structure next to the gate? Does anyone know? And it's kind of at a time like that you sort of feel like, I wish I had a drone, right? Laura's, thanks so much. Laura says, thanks very much, Laura. I appreciate it. Thank you. Another thing that's a little bit interesting here is the one of these has kind of been bent. I don't know if it's vandalism or what, but this one's kind of bent over, and the other one is sort of upright and normal. But you can't help thinking that isn't there a similar thing going on here as with the Delphi case, which is would these trees not have provided some sort of sound shielding in terms of it being like what would the perpetrator be the most concerned about when he committed this crime? And isn't the answer if somebody heard sounds, they'd be able to say what time the crime happened? And so doesn't he feel that the trees would provide audio shielding, and so no one would hear any sounds? Do you agree with that? Does that make sense? So what I've just done is I've taken you as close as you can get to the Moselle property. If you'd gone there, that's exactly what you would have seen. Someone said, what do I click on to donate? Can anyone help Cheryl out? There's a little, I think there's a sign, the dollar sign under the chat. And if you click on that, then it allows you a couple of options. Sally says, I think they're shooting all the time and nobody would pay attention to it unless it was near them. Well, what about shooting at 9 o'clock at night, 8:50, 9 o'clock at night, and quite a lot of shooting? I mean, how many shots were discharged? Right, around about a dozen, around about, what was it? Quite a few shots were discharged. That's quite an unusual time to be firing, like when it's dark, right? Cheryl, you figured it out. Thank you so much. Shamey Cake says, crazy seeing it from your perspective. Okay, so let's go on. And you can kind of just make out some tire tracks here. There are some stones, but you can kind of make out tire tracks. And probably when the cops arrived, they disturbed the tire tracks. Not that would have been of much use, really. I mean, he said he went out, he said he came back. Is really going to be much use looking at that? So if we stop it right there and just think about it from a criminal psychology perspective, and I doubt whether any of you have thought about this before. The fact that there's no sort of security fence around you, the fact that you could theoretically penetrate the Moselle residence through here, that kind of shows you that Alex Murdaugh's story kind of makes sense. What did he say? That his version was that someone who was upset about the Mallory Beach accident um, came to get revenge, and so that story makes sense in the sense that it wouldn't be that hard to get access to the property. Does that make sense? In other words, um, you could say it wasn't like this fortress and that it was impossible to get in. If someone wanted to get in, they would be able to get in. Do you see what I'm saying? And of course, Alex Murdaugh, who lived there, knew that. And so that's the story he was using for his own benefit. Can you see how it kind of makes sense? But it's also quite mischievous. That's that's also true. I was trying to think where the nearest surveillance was. Thanks a lot, Sharon. Okay, let's continue. So that's the picture used in my cover picture. And what's quite funny is I took this picture, and then about 5 or 10 minutes later, a vehicle pulled up, and I was like, "Whoa! I wonder if this is someone who lives there, or the new owners, or whatever. Have they seen?" Because I kind of thought, have they seen me on the surveillance, and now they're coming to confront me, right? So I saw this sort of dark vehicle pull up, and then the next thing I saw a couple standing, and then they were taking photos of each other. In other words, literally 5 minutes after I did this, someone else pulled up and did exactly the same thing. It's quite funny. So from the front of the Moselle property, if you just go further on, if you just go further, not that much further, there's a home over here. Someone said that that home used to belong to the housekeeper that died. I don't know if that's true. The people that, in fact, I think Laurie may even have said that. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if you guys know that. But anyway, if you look carefully, there's additional um, sort of signs over here saying don't go any further. And you actually get a really good view, and you'll recognize, I'm going to take you there in a moment, you'll recognize the photos taken by not the paparazzi, but reporters and other people of the sort of edge of the dog kennels when you stand in that position. I'm just letting you know it's not really that far from the front gate. Um, Here I am standing in front of the front gate. When you take a photo that way, it's really just down the road. And I mean, this is the dog kennels are just sort of over there, right? Just there. So let's go there. So now we in front of that spot. So right, that what you see over there, those sort of signs, that is when you're standing right in front of them. And there's a little bit of tape. You can see it's not very extensive. It's not very extensive security, but there are lots of warnings. Video surveillance, and so on. And I don't really know where the video surveillance is, but I guess it's somewhere. And it's tied onto the post box. That's just stepping a little bit further back. Again, the dog kennels are sort of in this area here, if that makes sense. And it does make one wonder, why did Murdaugh just not exit this part, right? Why would he not exit this exit? And the answer is because he was trying to set up an alibi where he looked innocent, and an innocent person would have exited there, right? A guilty person, why on earth are you exiting over here? right? So that was part of manufacturing that alibi, in my opinion. That's right. That's right. I'm not. Is there a camera over there? I'm not quite sure what that is. So this is the view just to the one side, and you can kind of start making out what's over there, the sheds and so on. I think I've got a better photo than that one. You can start making out the sheds over there. No, it's not the cabin. It's the sheds and the dog kennels. That's that area. That's kind of a better photo of it. But the dog kennels are sort of here. Wolfie says I'm going to watch this again on a LG screen TV later. Okay. So again, I'm just trying to take you right to as far as close as you can get to, and this is exactly what you would see if you were there on your own feet. That's what you would see. Does that feel quite authentic, quite real? The mailbox is on the right hand side. It's over here. I'm not sure if that's a camera. I'm not 100% sure. But this was a situation. I parked over there, walked over here, and I was just taking some photos over here. And that's when a vehicle pulled up kind of behind me in front of the front gate. I think, wonder if I've actually caught it on camera there. But again, you don't often see the other side of the road. And so that's a perspective also wanted just to capture. What does the other side of the road look like? And so from there we go to Hampton, right? And Hampton's really just around the corner. And the sun was about to set when I got there. Now let's enter the town limits. Let's go forward. There we go. Okay, so there's the railway line. So let me ask you guys again, what is the significance of the railway line in this story? Um, I think I asked Laurie and she definitely gave me the right answer. Thanks a lot, Elise. I know what your real name is. I won't say it here. Christina said Alex said that Maggie came in the kennel entrance that night and got the mail from the mailbox. That's interesting. Silent Member says, I like your perspective on this environment more than the news version. Cool. Oh, there you go. Great. So, the Murdoch dynasty arguably all started when their great grandfather either committed suicide, and it's very hard to know which one it is. Personally, I believe it was suicide. That because he was old and he was in ill health, and he was a lawyer, and maybe things were so bad in the South that they felt that they didn't have very much of an option. And what would have been the most lucrative, what would have been the most wealthy company in that region at that time of the year? And the answer is the rail company, right? And so, isn't that how it, didn't they stage a train crash, and then they made money out of that, and that just got the ball rolling, right? It's a very interesting perspective, because if you say that that's true, then you can understand how you can go from that to this huge shit stain that somebody referred to. If it was an accident, then you might say maybe they felt like they had a bone to pick with whatever. But I just think if it's not an accident and it was done on purpose, then that psychology, that tricksy trickery, was in place such a long time ago, and didn't that morph ultimately into what the Murdaugh dynasty ultimately became, and ultimately into Alex Murdaugh? It's a question, I think, and I think quite an interesting question. So let's do a quick poll. Well, let's do a quick poll. How many of you here think that the great grandfather set up his death? And in other words, it was a contrivance. It was deception. And how many of you think it was an innocent accident, and blah blah blah? So if you think it was um, a deliberate scheme, put the number one. And if you think it was just an innocent thing, and because remember it's suicide because the guy died, then it's number two. So let's see what you guys say. Mel Stiller says suicide by train. Janine says a setup. Fake says profit from his suicide. So I'm seeing a lot of ones. I don't think I see any two so far. And I've got to say, I mean, it's a very hard thing to prove one way or the other, but I tend to, I just suspect that this was actually um, a trick. It wasn't an accident. Hazel Eyes says two. Sherry says the family sees an opportunity to sue and get rich. Gwen said, I think the family exploited his suicide. But I mean, it could even be a suicide by design where you say, I'm going to do this. I don't know. I mean, was he depressed? Was there any reason for him to commit suicide? So the number one is for whether you think it was a suicide and a trick to get to, not to extort money, but to contrive to get money. And number two is whether he died in an accident, blah, 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 right? Well, Elise says, I don't know enough about it to answer. Well, not knowing enough, what do you suspect? Or can you still not answer? I mean, it's a good answer also to say, I don't know enough. Hilarious too says, I can't imagine, but I guess it's possible. So anyway, this railway track is sort of, you keep crossing it. It's very part of the fabric of the Hamptons. You cross it on your way to Moselle. In other words, it constantly reminds you of what happened. It's very close to the Parker's law firm, the Murdaugh law firm. And so you keep crossing it. It's right. If you get into Hampton, the town, you've got to keep crossing it to go out of it as well. So, and every time you cross it, I mean, your tires go over it and it sort of jolts you a little bit. It's kind of a reminder of that, isn't it? So, what do you think? What do you think is worth visiting in Hampton? If you were in Hampton, what would you want to go and have a look at? Let me say that again. We're in Hampton. We've gone to Moselle. We're in Hampton. What do you want to go and have a look at? Just give me a moment. I'm going to turn off the aircon. I'm starting to get cold. Just give me a second. Okay, so we've got Christina. Christina definitely knows her stuff. Christina says the law firm and the courthouse. Absolutely right. Brooke says I drive by the law firm. Erica says the law firm. Okay, so do you guys want to go to the law firm? Because I want to take you there. You want to go there? I can take you there. What do you want to do? What do you? The beach house is at Edisto, right? Hampton is kind of in the middle of, I don't want to say in the middle of nowhere, but it's very close to Moselle. We're quite a long way from the coast, right? So, who wants to go to, okay, the law firm. So let's go to the law firm. Here we go. I think it's this one. So these are some of the really big houses in Hampton. Big stately houses that are all about power. And then you're going to see some small little houses as well. It is quite a pretty town. Look at this beautiful house. What is that house talking about? And this is a lovely time of day. It's when the light is kind of a soft golden color. It's a really good time. And so that's exactly where we're going. Unfortunately, it's closed, guys. Sorry, I couldn't take you inside. But now we're going to go to it's now called the Parker Law Group, and it gets 4.1 stars for legal services. Do you think that that's the right number? I don't know. Maybe it's gone down from 4.2, who knows? But anyway, there we go. And so there's a very crappy looking house right around the corner. Um, it's, it's probably a bit insensitive to say that. I just mean yeah, it's not like the house we've just seen a moment ago. And yet in the same town within really a mile of one another, you've got these less expensive houses, right? So at the stop after this, at that building, one's got to turn left to go to the law firm. And there it is. And it was kind of smaller than I expected it to be. I don't know, from the photos, I thought it would be quite a big building, but it was just not that big. I don't know if you get a sense of its size from this footage. It's not as big as I imagined it was. It was half or a third as big as I kind of imagined it. So although the Murdaugh sort of, you could say, ran Hampton County like a fiefdom, um, it's a small place. It's not really this huge kingdom to begin with. Does that make sense? Chelsea says it looks big. I don't know. I don't know. I thought it would be bigger than it actually was. That was my impression. So these are some houses right around the corner from it, very small, modest houses, and then you've got that building. And this is kind of going around the back of it. I don't know if you remember, Paul's girlfriend said they would sometimes go in there, and I think they were underage. They were whatever, 15, 16 years old, and they would be treated to drinks from the people who worked there. And, they would sometimes go in there as sort of guests of Alex Murdaugh, I guess. So I guess what you've got to think about as we're driving around this building is what was Alex Murdaugh thinking every day when he arrived at work? What was his attitude to his fellow man? Where does the Southern culture come into Alex Murdaugh? Where does that feature in terms of his personality and his makeup and who he is and kind of his identity? And that's where it kind of gets quite interesting, where you actually have some insight in terms of this case, where you say, you know what, I think I've actually figured something out. I've actually, wow, that actually makes sense. So if you say, what does it mean to be Southern? We've been trying to slowly get to this point. And then you say, it means being rich. Yes, it does mean being rich. It does. Being Southern means being rich, especially if you are rich, it means being rich. It also means being poor. It means some people are going to be poor and you're going to be rich, or it means um, you're going to be poor and someone else is going to be rich, and that's not going to change. And what is it like to feel that way? That you live somewhere and whatever the status quo, that's not going to change. There are rich people who live here, and you're not one of them, and that's not going to change. Someone else is in charge, or we're the rich people here and we're in charge and you guys are the poor people, and that is not going to change. You know what I'm trying to get at? And it's like, do you live in a community that's like that? In other words, um, you belong to a particular status quo and that's not going to change. Do you live in a community like that? If you do, I would really encourage you to leave. You know, go somewhere where hard work is rewarded. Go somewhere where you have the freedom to be who you are. Don't go somewhere where somebody else is in charge. Well, unless they like you. That's quite a good point. So, can you see how being rich in Hampton and in that part of South Carolina meant, and you were a lawyer, meant not only were you the law, but it also meant that you were going to stay that way. It meant that you were going to stay that way, and it suggests that the people who weren't rich were also going to stay that way. In other words, do you know what your place is? You know what your place is. Your place is there, and your place is there, and someone else has decided that on your behalf, right? And there's something incredibly arrogant about that. There's something like, well, it's always been done this way, or this is kind of a legacy of the past, and so it's got nothing to do with me. It's just the way it's always been done. That's not very nice, though. It's not really very nice. Can't you treat me, um, you know, can't you treat me as an individual? No, 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 no. What family are you part of? Tell me, what's your surname? Oh, sorry, I can't help you. Sorry about that. So, can you see how the poll questions aren't as dumb and as vacuous as they seemed at the beginning? They actually do feature into the cultural fabric here, but more importantly, in the criminal psychology, where someone is thinking, I'm rich and you poor. That's sorry, that's the way it is, and that's how it's going to be, and that's to my advantage. I don't really have to worry about that, right? Are you poor? And you somebody a tree fell on your house? Oh, too bad. Don't worry, we'll help you out. But actually, I'm also going to help myself out. And actually, I don't really care about you. I kind of care about me, but I'll pretend to care about you. Is that what being southern means? That you sort of there's a lot of pageantry and a lot of good manners, but actually behind the manners is something else is going on. And I'm not trying to tar everyone with that brush. I'm simply saying, was that what was going on with Alex Murdaugh? Was that what was going on with Patsy Ramsey? Is that what sort of goes on here and there? Because it was also going on with um, someone else associated with Alex Murdaugh. Well, there's a court case dealing with that, right? The other thing is this question of the South is about family. Well, that can be a good thing, where you say family comes first and blood is thicker than water and all that kind of thing. Well, do you think for Alex Murdaugh, the South was about family? Well, the answer is yes. I'm a Murdaugh. And was that true of Paul Murdaugh? Family comes first. Well, I'm a Murdaugh, I don't know if family came first because with Paul, according to what some people said, he was raised by the housekeeper and, he wasn't the firstborn and all that kind of thing. But for all intents and purposes, if you're a murder, that is quite important. But then you say, did family come first for Alex Murdaugh? Let me put that in chat and see what you guys say. Did family come first for Alex Murdaugh? Did family come first for Patsy Ramsey? Someone says money came first. So the thing where most of you guys voted, it means being rich. Only 5% voted that. 20% said the South is about family. Well, was it about family for Alex Murdaugh? Was and it might originally have been. Who knows? Maybe when he was born, he was like, "I'm a Murdaugh, awesome." But ultimately, what what did it mean to be who he was, where he was? I think it was all about being rich. It was all about finding sneaky ways of making money. Does that make sense? Like, am I making a bit of a breakthrough with you guys? If you look at the picture on screen, you've got that law firm. Is that law firm about family comes first, or is that law firm about something else that comes first? Our clients come first. What comes first? So Sally says Patsy was reliving her childhood and beauty pageant years and going to raise a future star. I mean, if you take Patsy Ramsey, did family come first with Patsy Ramsey? Meaning, did Patsy put herself kind of aside and she put the needs of John Bonet and Burke and John kind of front and center? Or was Patsy all about pageantry and showing off her house and turning John Bonet into a beauty queen? Well, if she's turning John Bonet into a beauty queen, what was she turning Burke into? What was Burke's claim to fame? Now, if she was obsessing and doting on John Bonet in a certain way because she was such a great mother and because family comes first. How was she doing that with Burke? I mean, she was writing cards and letters about what was going on with her kids. So what was going on? When Patsy had cancer, did the family rally around her? What was her relationship? What was the family relationship like when Patsy had cancer? Now, I deal with that in some of my books. When John Bonet died, did the family come together and they dealt with things in a certain way, or did they deal with things in a different way? Perhaps where they said money comes first. We can't afford to lose this contract with Access Graphics or whatever, or we can't afford to lose our reputation. What are we talking about here? What does it mean to be Southern? Again, I don't want to tar everyone with the same brush and say, if you Southern, you are either Patsy Ramsey or Alex Murdaugh. We're trying to say, essentially, what aspect of being Southern could have fed into specific criminal psychology in this case or that case. That's what we're saying. I'm not certainly not trying to say if you Southern, you have criminal psychology, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm simply saying something that was already there. How could that actually feed into the events that we know took place? Does that make sense? And again, it's one of the incredible gifts when you travel to a place that part of what you learn is the cultural psychology, which is coming from a way, as a very, very broad perspective. It's helping you to feed into that narrow perspective. It's giving you a very, very good general sense, kind of the specifics, right? Okay, so let's go on to the next thing. So, not quite sure what this map's about. Not quite sure what I was trying to say here. Um, I think it's the distance to. I think this is the distance to the Stephen Smith um, site. So it's basically less than 6 miles from the Parker Law Building. It's less than 6 miles to where Stephen Smith died. So there are just a couple of additional images, and you can see just how beautiful this building appears in the late afternoon light. You know that the bridge, the brick glows a beautiful golden biscuit brown in the late afternoon light. Just look at that. And in a way, I mean, it's kind of a fairy tale. Imagine working there. You know, it's the best place to work in the county. It's the best place to work, perhaps not in South Carolina, but you know, one of the best places to work. And and did they do? You know, what was going on there? What was Alex thinking when he went to work every day? It kind of looks like a fairy. It's almost like a gingerbread house, isn't it? It looks like a good place to work. And look where Alex Murdaugh is right now. Somebody who worked in this building, who was one of the most respected people in this building, is going to be spending summer in jail or in prison. It's kind of a picture perfect building. I mean, isn't it a it looks so neat. It looks so you know, like everything is very well taken care of. Well, was it? When you look at that building, don't you think everything is organized? Everything is sorted out. You know, I can trust what's going on here. You know, that you're going to take my case and look after me. Well, is that what happened? Thanks, Sonia. So just a couple of different views. Look at the big building on the left, small little building on the right. There were a lot of parking spaces, and these were all for clients of the building. All of these little signs were to say client parking only. Can you see? Client parking only. Let's just go back to that. Client parking only, client parking only. So the clients park here. You sort of wonder, what have their clients been like since Alex Murdaugh? Are there fewer clients now? Do the clients say, I'd like a Murdaugh attorney? What do they say? Is there a sense of amnesia in the law firm? No, we don't talk about Murdaugh, or, what's the attitude like inside behind those doors? What is it like? We've got someone, I think that's new in chat, says, you have asked the wrong thing in your poll, but it's related to this case. It's you can only give 4 options in a YouTube poll. It's the options related to this case. So please don't give me too much of a hard time over that. But I did wonder, what has changed since the Murdaugh case for this firm? Is there a Murdaugh still working in this firm? Has anything changed? Should something change? Is the story over? What do you guys think? Is the story over? So Wolfie says his brother still works there, or probably still works there. Janine says, doesn't Randy still practice there? Alex's oldest brother still works there. And so the question is, if one of the Murdaughs is still working in this building, what does that mean, and does it mean anything? What does it say about the other people who run this law firm? Or doesn't it say anything? Does it say something, or does it not say anything? So just a couple more images, and yeah, just that perspective. You can see just how beautiful it looks in the late afternoon light, right? Okay, and let's move on to the courthouse. Interesting how the flag is in sunshine, but the courthouse, well, that side of it isn't. Another view of the courthouse. And so I'm going to just show you a few quick images of the railway area, and then we'll go to the Stephen Smith, the road, the Sandy Run Road. So I just remembered that from the documentary, that particular water tower. I thought I would just record that because it does give you a sense of Hampton. It's interesting that you got that new water tower and then you got the very old rusted one across the railway tracks as well. And you just kind of got to wonder, what is it like living and working in this little town, growing up close to this little town? So just a couple of perspectives. I'll put that one on full screen. I quite like that one. Giles says it's probably wonderful. Laura says, I totally agree. And for quite some time, it says something about their bookkeeping practices as well. Yeah, I think you're right about that, Christina. Okay. You can tell I was quite enjoying this late afternoon light on this tower. The whole idea with this is just to give it a little bit of a creepy vibe. Did I succeed? So we're going to go to the Suzanne says, yeah. We're going to go to the railway track and then on to, wow, I took a lot of photos. And then on to the Stephen Smith, that area that, on the road and that sort of thing. So this is there's that other water tower. Quite interesting that you've got the brand new one and then you've got the sort of scraggly old one as well. I don't know why they couldn't just paint that and sort it out. Anyway, this is the railway track. Again, just asking the question, did did the original Southern gentleman have mischievous ideas and did that then lead to other people taking the what's the word, taking their lead from him? So I'm going to run through these quite quickly because there are quite a few of them. Just some shots of the railway track. Again, the light is quite stunning, so I did take quite a few photos. It's very hard for me when it's this time of day to just drive on and not do anything because it really is a special time of day and you get such picturesque, artful photos, and footage. Sonia says, I lived in Barnwell, South Carolina, and the fire ants are enormous. So, the question that we're kind of asking is, did a railway incident really lead to the pot of gold at the end of the railway, at the end, at the end of the rainbow for the Murdaughd's? And did they then start thinking about that as a way of making money? And isn't that ultimately what happened? I don't know. Is it some kind of dark? Is there some kind of dark backstory, or not? If only there was a camera in whatever the year was. What was it? 1910, 1920? I don't know when it happened. Only there was a camera and we could see that would be interesting. Anyway, just some more photos, more perspectives. I'm going to just go very quickly. There's my vehicle in the background there. So I kind of did need to get going. The sun was about to set, and I needed to get to the road where poor Stephen Smith lost his life. And so, yeah, I couldn't carry on with too many photos. Quite a beautiful cloudscape in the background. Sonia Stanger, welcome. There are some additional members only videos just based on what I was doing and seeing every day in the area, so you can check those out. Okay, so off we go now to Sandy Run Road. You can see the sun is almost setting, and by the time I got there, it was still light enough to, well, you'll see the footage that I did get. I don't know if some of you will recognize some of the homes on the way there. Again, I don't know why this is upside down. So this is getting very close to the spot. And can you see how narrow the road is? Do you kind of get a sense that the road is actually really, really narrow? So right up ahead, the road's going to take a turn, and that is actually where it took place. You'll see a house just to the right, not this one, but the next one. I think it's the next one. This house over here, there's a dog over there. The dog gets up. The dog was sitting in the middle of the road. The dog gets up. And now you're going to see a turn in the road. That house right there on the right, that's the last house. Now, watch how sharply the road turns at this point. Look at this. There's the cross on the right. Do you see how sharp that turn is? So I'm going to just show that last bit one more time. I want you to concentrate on how narrow the road is and also on how sharp the turn is in the road. It's a sharper turn than you actually think. There's the cross on the right. And the cross is on the turn, right? Okay. So now we're approaching from the other direction, right? We're coming back. And I want you to pay attention to these lines going across the road. So I'm going to turn right, and I want you to pay attention to the lines going across the road. That's a sign to Crocketville. Look at the lines across the road, and that is where the accident happened, is right where it crosses the road. Right there. There. So the cross is actually not where it happened, it's a little bit further down. Yeah, and I mean, that is quite a good observation. There are skid marks. Those look like skid marks. Those look like skid marks. So this was having parked the vehicle, and obviously I got out on foot and just had a look. And I must say, for the roads that I was on, this was a fairly busy road compared to just other roads. I mean, in this shot, you can actually see two cars in the same picture. I don't know if you can actually see just from this picture how narrow the road is. But I mean, yeah, this guy's gone onto the left, I guess, to avoid me, and he hasn't been. He went on the left, even though a car was approaching on the left. But he didn't really see me in time because the road. So this is the first insight. This is the first insight: is that the road not only turns but also dips. Okay, the road doesn't only turn, but after it turns, it actually dips downwards. And it's interesting that Erica says no shoulder, because my observation was that there was more of a shoulder than I expected. Okay, so let's continue. Can you see that the road dips? Look at the car in the distance. I don't know if you're gonna see it. It's gonna dip down. No, I cut it off. Anyway, the road dips. It turns and then it dips downward. I don't know if you can see a little bit more clearly here that the road after this point goes down. Mel says there's a grassy area, not really a shoulder. My impression was that the grassy area was shorter than what it usually is. I'm not sure if it's due to. Bear in mind, I was there late May, and Stephen died July 8th, and so just that alone, it would be like midsummer, whereas I was there in early summer. My impression was that the grass had actually been cut, but maybe it was just early growth. I don't know. But although I could walk in the grass, I don't think Stephen Smith did or wanted to. And I'll talk to you guys a little bit more about that in a second. So again, I'm not sure if you can see, but the in the distance, can you see that the road actually after this point it kind of goes down? Again, you can see it's a relatively busy road. While I was there were quite a few vehicles that came along. When I was in front of the Moselle property, there was one vehicle that came by, and it was people that were interested in true crime who would normally not have been there. When I was here, there was almost like constant traffic going by. There's another vehicle, and I think there's another vehicle there in the distance. So it's a fairly busy road. I'm not sure what the speed limit is. So obviously, I kind of took a moment and I just thought about this youngster, and I've visited, the 1122 King Road, where four people died who were brutally murdered with a knife. And to me, this is just tragic. Whether it was an accident or something more, it's tragic that a young person lost their life. It's a beautiful area, and this is where their life ended. Right? There's another car coming down the road. Now, what I want you to take note of here is how these lines cross over, and they do so immediately above the area where Stephen was actually struck. They cross over immediately over this sort of area where he was actually struck. I've got an idea that the cross is where it is because putting it where, if you put the cross where he was actually killed, would be a safety hazard. So people stop their cars because there's space to stop their cars and it's not on a corner. But that would not be a very good spot for people to stop their cars. It's very close to a blind rise and it's on a fairly sharp corner. Does that make sense? Yes, so I'm going to take you to the actual spot now. We're going to go to onto the road and just see what we can figure out from that. So when you look back, it looks perfectly straight. When you look back from this angle, it looks perfectly straight. This cross is in line with this pole, but that's not where the accident actually happened. So I noticed quite big holes in the road. There's one of them. There's the square. I was quite surprised that it was still there. And what do you notice about this square that maybe you didn't notice before? What do you notice about this square that maybe you didn't notice before? I'm not sure if I put one or 2 points already, but anyway, here's number two. Let's see what you guys are saying. Silent Murmur says, I'm sweaty for no reason. Um, there you go. That's what I'm looking for. It's off center. It's more off to one side. Yeah. And it's not just really a little off center, it's actually quite substantially off center. And so I just want to reiterate that you hear over and over again that Stephen was lying in the middle of the road. Technically, it's true. He was lying. He wasn't lying on the side of the road, but it's a little bit. I don't know. I just sort of feel like it's not strictly speaking true that he was in the middle of the road. He was actually more kind of slightly to one side of the road, right? He wasn't like lying. His entire body basically on the middle line, right? And that narrative is kind of what I kind of heard reinforced over and over again. He was lying in the middle of the road. He was lying in the middle of the road. And I understand why someone would say that, because he's certainly closer to the middle of the road than he is to the side of the road, right? He's closer to the center than he is to the side. But I also wouldn't say he was lying in the middle of the road. He was lying also off the center of the middle of the road. And I think it is important to be accurate about that. Let me play this video again, this time on full screen. And it's also important to say and recognize on what side of the road was his body on, what side of the road. What side of the road was he likely walking on, if he was walking, and on what side of the road would traffic, if traffic did hit him, what side of the road would that be? So I've kind of had a theory, and I mean, obviously you kind of decide, you get a sense when you're in the area, when you're there on your own feet, on your own, looking at it, whether the theory that you arrive there with, whether it makes any sense, right? And so the theory I have is that Stephen was walking. And you might say, no, I don't think he was walking. Someone took him out of his car. Well, anyway, my theory is that he was walking. Anyway, my theory is that he was walking, and he was walking on the left side of the road, which is the side of the road I would be walking on. And traffic was coming on this side, in other words, coming from the front, right? That's my theory. And if that basic theory is true, then you would expect him, if he was struck, to be lying on the, well, let me ask the question. Would you expect him, if that is the scenario, if that's true, if it's accurate, if that is what happened, would you expect him to be lying on the left-hand side of the road or the right-hand side of the road? Let me just say that again. So if the scenario is true and it makes sense, and he was struck in this way, which side of the road would you expect him to be found on? The left-hand side or the right-hand side, right? And so just that aspect already does make sense. I've already said it before, in my opinion, when he was struck, he could actually have spun around. So I don't think he was just struck and then he fell where he was struck. I've got the feeling that he actually spun around. And that is why his legs came up, because he was spinning, and that's also why his arms went out. So he was struck and then he spun, and then he ended up where he was. And part of the reason why he spun in the direction he did was because of the way he was struck. And I mean, that's something that the lawyers can do a reenactment with and see whether that is demonstrably true. We will see. Okay. Sherry says, didn't he have both shoes on? And if he was struck, no way. Yes, I've heard that argument as well. I think you're assuming he was struck by a car going really, really fast. And as you can see, it's a narrow road. It's on a corner. And I think he was struck by a logging vehicle, which I think wasn't going very fast. I have actually put up incident scene photos. And so for all of those people who think that he was murdered somewhere else and taken there, I can't do any better than just say this. I've put up incident scene photos. You can clearly see that a lot of blood that was lost right there on the road. It sort of flowed right across the road. I hate to be so graphic, but there's no other way just to say, it wasn't like he was placed in the road, and there was nothing around him. I've actually heard someone saying that, and it's not actually true, that he was like placed in the road, and there's nothing around him. Actually, there was a long stream of blood going from the one side of the road to the other. And you could only really have a situation like that with such a severe head wound if he died on the spot. So that's my response to that. Wolfie says, I think he was killed right there. Wendy says, I hope his mother gets answers soon. So this was the other thing that really surprised me. When I was researching this using Google Earth, I thought I find it quite interesting that this little margin here is actually quite wide, right? And you might say, no, it's not wide at all. There's no shoulder. I'm just saying that in my opinion, I thought this was quite a wide shoulder, or quite a wide little strip for how narrow the entire road is. So, like when you're driving, it's really not a very wide road, and yet there's a little provision made for whatever, you know. There's the white line, and there's a little strip of tar that's about a foot wide after the white line. And this is where it gets really, really interesting. At one point, I stopped my vehicle a long distance from the sign that I think says "Welcome to Beaufort," and I might show you that if we've got time during this live stream. And because it was a really busy road, I couldn't stop my car really very close. So I stopped my car where I could stop my car, and then I had quite a long walk back. Right, so I had the same shoes on that you can see in that picture, and now I was walking on a road that I was unfamiliar with. So what did I do? So in other words, right now I'm trying to get to a sign. I want to get there. I realize it's quite unsafe. I can see cars are coming, and so what am I going to do? And this was the situation. The the side of the road, the sort of embankment, was not only sloped but kind of clumpy, and the grass was kind of long. So it was kind of, and then to the left of that was sort of pine woods, some of which seemed to be submerged. It seemed to kind of be muddy or just wet. So there's no way I was going to walk there. And so I kind of had to make a choice. Am I going to walk on this sort of clumpy, uneven, thick, sloping grass, but like right next to a highway where there's a chance that you could actually trip and then fall into the road because it was so uneven? It's kind of thick grass and it's uneven, right? And I could feel my knees and my calves struggling because it was a long way to walk. It's not just, around the corner. It was a long way to walk. And so what happened? Well, I felt tempted to walk on the road. And so basically I was thinking in my mind, is there a provision made for me to walk? In other words, is there a white line and is there a little section for me to walk? And why would you think that and why would you do that? Well, if the section beside the road isn't very great for a pedestrian to walk on, right? In other words, it's okay to walk 10 feet or 20 feet or 30 feet over thick, uneven grass next to a road. It's not okay, it's not easy to do that for a quarter of a mile and then half a mile or whatever it was. And I probably walked maybe a quarter of a mile to half a mile in total just to photograph a sign, right? But while I did that, I was just conscious of how tired my legs were getting walking on the grass. And although I knew it was dangerous, I sort of felt, you know what, it'll be actually safe and more comfortable if I walk on the tar. But when cars come by, I can sort of hear them or whatever, and then get off the tar. And then you get off the tar and you walk in the grass, but then your legs get tired again, and then you kind of want to get back onto the tar. Does that make sense? Uh, So Brooke says, if you see a vehicle coming, are you going to move closer to the road or further from the road? So it's a good argument, but the other argument is if you've been walking for say already a mile or 2 miles, then you might basically have the attitude, it's okay for me to walk here, right? And I will walk here and you're going to drive there, if that makes sense. In other words, that's where you should be and that's where I can be. And sometimes you make assumptions like that when you're driving. When you're driving, you assume that that person is going to know what to do and they're going to behave and they're going to whatever. And then they just don't do that. They just don't do what you thought they would, right? Um, Thanks a lot, Don Spencer. Remember the wild. Oh, the wild pigs. Okay. Anyway, I just thought that, like, I personally experienced it when I walked to the sign that as dangerous as it was, I was on a really, really, really busy road, like with traffic constantly streaming. And I kind of felt it is so uncomfortable walking on this thick, sloping grass. And I'm getting tired walking on this grass that I'm kind of willing to sort of take a little bit of a risk and do something that's somewhat dangerous. And what made it even more dangerous was that I had my back to the traffic. So on the way to the sign, I was walking against the flow of traffic, so I could see the traffic. On the way back, I was walking with my back to the traffic, and I was nevertheless walking on that little bit of strip of tar, but then looking over my shoulder because I wanted to walk on the tar, looking over my shoulder. And when cars came by, I would sort of step onto the grass again, blah, blah, blah. But what I'm trying to get at is the the way that I was kind of insisting on putting myself in harm's way. Well, and so why did I do that? Because it was uncomfortable walking on this grass. And bear in mind, I was doing this in broad daylight. So if the grass was sloping and it was, what's the word, clumpy and uneven, I at least could see it. And I could see, well, walk over there. What Stephen couldn't. Stephen was walking at night, right? And what's the other thing? And the grass does slope downwards on both sides, right? And he walked much further than I walked. He probably walked 4 or 5 or 6 times further than I walked. And yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I was just going to a sign, so I just sort of felt I'm just going a shortish distance, and it's not going to be that bad. I mean, in a way, it would have been more dangerous to cross the road and then walk against the flow of traffic and then cross the road again. It was a very, very busy road. And so, anyway, so I noticed there's a consistent line of like a little boundary where one could walk. And you see how at the road slants downwards after 2 or 3 feet. It slants downwards. Same on both sides. Slants downwards, right? It's also kind of clumpy, and this would have been much longer. And you can see it from the footage. It's much longer when Stephen Smith died. Here's a car track, by the way, right there. There's a car track right there. And you could have other things happening as well, an animal running across the road, or you think you're seeing an animal running across the road, or whatever. And so the other thing that's interesting is how over here it's extremely the line is extremely close to the verge. That makes sense. So that's another thing. So you can imagine that if Stephen Smith wanted to walk on the road, well, here he wouldn't have a choice really, right? Just follow my reasoning when I say this. If he wanted to walk on the road, well, here he wouldn't have a choice. Whereas over here, If he wanted to walk on the road, he would be tempted to do so because it's quite wide. So maybe you totally disagree with what I'm saying. You're saying someone whose name starts with a B definitely murdered Stephen Smith. Okay, that's one argument. But if you put that aside for a moment and you say, okay, well, if he was walking, do you think that he was tempted to walk on the road right over here? And look where we're talking about. That's where that box is. And there it's quite wide. And if you go further away from it, it's very narrow. There's virtually no space to do that, right? And if you go backside, it's also fairly wide. So on this little section of road, that little space, that little margin, that verge, is relatively wider than elsewhere on the road. And so so simple question, if this is what was going on, is it more likely that he was walking on the road? And I think the answer is yes. In other words, could he have been struck somewhere around about here, exactly where these skid marks are? Could he have been struck somewhere around about here from the front and sort of spun around and then ended up over here? The other thing to look at is you can see that there are, so there's a curve in the road, but there are problems with the road right here. There's some more skid marks there as well. Where the road has been, there are holes in the road and the road has been repaired all along this middle margin. And so did the person driving tend to go further to the right or to the left when he saw these holes in the road? And I'm going to show these holes to you in a moment. In other words, the person's just driving down this road, but at night it's going to accentuate these holes in the middle of the road. Is that going to affect what they're doing? And if the person feels like, I can't go that way, I see something on the left, I can't go that way, which way are they going to go? I don't know if that makes sense to you, what I'm saying. That does make sense. That does make sense. So there I provide a little bit of a explanation. I'm not going to do that here. Um, maybe maybe I can just mute it. So there I'm just showing you the width of that boundary and then how it on that side it's actually quite wide. On the other side, it gets narrower, but it's at its widest. So can you see how it's narrower as you go a bit further? And that's not just perspective. There's also quite a big hole in the road right over there. Okay. So someone was saying that it makes total sense that you would just step off the road, right? And then what the dark would make approaching light show up way before the vehicle, right? So this is the part that I think you're not appreciating is, let's say you did that, then the moment the vehicle's past you, it's pitch dark, right? So the vehicle passes you, it's pitch dark, and now you are on the grass and it's uneven. And maybe you also trip. Maybe you sort of trip and you stumble, right? And then you move over to the road and another vehicle comes by and it shines its lights. And you can clearly see where the white line is, and you think that the vehicle can. And then you step off the road again, and that vehicle passes, and now you're again in complete darkness. And because you're in complete darkness, you sort of trip. You kind of stumble. You don't kind of know where you are, and you sort of stumble. And then you go back to the road, and another car passes, and again you step off the road. It blinds you when it passes for a moment. Again, you trip because you can't quite see what's in front of you. And so don't you want like a level road in front of you? In other words, what I'm trying to get at is, aren't you tempted to put yourself in harm's way? You might say, I wouldn't be. And you might say, no one would be, but we're talking about a 17-year-old. And the other thing that I think is quite interesting is he was just around the corner from being kind of completely safe. In other words, just a bit further was a turn off to where the road where his grandfather's father lived. So he may have felt, I've just got to get a couple of yards further, right, along this road, this fairly busy road, and then when I get around the corner, which is just a bit further, it's really not much further on, then I'll be fine. And so maybe based on that, he took a risk. I don't know. Did I say you're 17? I think I'm thinking of Kylie Ryan. Yeah, he was 19 years old. He was going to like a nursing college. Gloria says most vehicle accidents happen 5 miles from your home. But I mean, the bottom line is something happened probably because someone made an error, in my opinion. This didn't happen because someone, uh, what's the word, were perfectly safe. I'm talking about either the driver or the pedestrian or both. Something happened because someone wasn't um, taking the right amount of safety precautions, age 19. Yeah, he was supposed to be walking to his father's place. Karina said, I'm truly undecided here. So I must also tell you the following. While I was taking these photos, at one point, I really wish I'd caught it on camera. While I was taking these photos, a blue sports car, I didn't get a very good look at it, but it was sort of it's just sort of quite low on the road. It kind of looked like it could be a Ferrari but it was a zooped up kind of sports car. So that car and another car kind of passed me very sort of they both passed me almost simultaneously, and I kind of got the idea they saw where I was, they saw what I was doing, and the one vehicle, the blue sports car, kind of sped up, but like in an exaggerated way. So the engine like really revved, and I wouldn't say it frightened me, but it was, I guess, quite intimidating. I felt like someone was communicating a message, and I'm not kidding. Probably a few seconds later, 4 seconds later, having just passed my vehicle, I thought I heard 3 or 4 gunshots. I'm not kidding. Um, Someone was saying, well, what could it have been the vehicle backfiring? I guess I know what backfiring sounds like. I don't know if a vehicle backfires 4 times, but those sounded like gunshots to me. And so I kind of got a weird sense of local territorial feelings about all of this. And I kind of got the feeling that the locals don't like whatever people are thinking or saying about this case. That's literally what I thought. Um, and yeah, the thought did cross my mind. So he was a gay teenager. What did people think about that? And anyway, so that was something that was definitely strange. Um, I can't I can't say for a fact that it was. I mean, because if you think about it, are you really honestly saying that someone drove past someone who's taking photos in a road, had a gun with them, like had a gun on them, pulled the gun out and shot like 4 shots out the window? It seems quite unlikely. But the fact is, this car passed me, and a couple of seconds later, I heard 4 shots, and it was from this vehicle. And I'm not saying he was shooting at me. I think he was shooting in the air or something. But I got a really strong sense of a sort of territorial disdain for this particular case being spoken about or people. And then when I met Laurie, she said that a lot of people in the area are very unhappy with the attention that these cases are getting. Um, Yeah, and and as a result, you don't want to be here after dark, and this is very close to after dark, right? So, like I've been saying all along that I believe that he was hit by a logging truck. Um, they found flecks of blue paint, I think, in his shirt, and I don't think, and those flecks of blue paint are associated with a old make of Ford, I believe, right? And I think that's the best evidence we've got about what happened to him. And that you could kind of tie a little bow around that and say, well, that's your theory and that works out. But that kind of incident where the guys drove by was definitely pretty weird. Like I was like, wow, okay, um, okay, So I don't know what. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what else to say in terms of that. Let's take you through a couple more images. Another thing that I found deceptive was I was under the impression that I was hearing vehicles approaching from the front, and then I just didn't see them. I'm not making this up. I was under the impression that vehicles were coming closer. The sound of vehicles were coming closer, and as I say, there's a dip in the road, and then they just didn't arrive. So I heard them, and then they just didn't pitch up. Now my impression was that, oh, is there a road that's sort of over there that these cars are turning down, right? And I think there is, but the point I'm trying to make is I'd be taking photos, I'd hear a vehicle, I would get off the road, and then no vehicle would come by, right? And that happened quite a few times, and I thought, what's going on here? Um, is there another road? And then I looked, I heard the vehicle, and then a vehicle, and then I saw the vehicle and came by. All I'm trying to say is it sort of can create a little bit of confusion where you are alert and, oh, that's a false alarm. Alert, that's a false alarm. Could that have been a factor here at 3 o'clock in the morning? I don't know. I don't know. Um, Don says, I disagree in that logging truck drivers know the terrain. They are very cautious in curves due to top heavy loads. Um, all I would say about that is a logging truck on this road on a corner, right? It's just a simple engineering thing. A logging truck on a corner, when the truck is turning the corner, what's going to happen? So if you have a corner like that, kind of think of a proper example. If you kind of got a corner like that and the truck's going around the corner and there's a long piece sticking out, and possibly the truck, the driver either gets rattled because he sees an animal or he even sees Stephen and he kind of swerves out the way and then he corrects himself. Couldn't that cause a sort of a jackknife situation to take place? You could even have the simplest explanation of all is that the driver was getting drowsy. The driver was getting sleepy, and so he kind of went slightly off the road. That's the simplest explanation of all. And I can tell you, I was extremely drowsy driving throughout South Carolina because the roads are often quite monotonous. They're completely straight, and they're just trees on both sides. And in the day, it's kind of fine, but later at night, I definitely got quite drowsy. And while I was in Georgia, which is the state right next door, someone actually flew right over a flatbed because they weren't concentrating on the highway. There's a flatbed parked next to the highway, and someone went over the flatbed, ramped into the sky, and had really serious injuries. So that brings us to this clue. I don't know if I can show you the clue that I found. Not really a clue, it's just something that I noticed. This is just giving you a little bit of a sense of there's that square. Let me put it on full screen. There's the square. And look at these gouges in the road. And again, it's not really how shallow or deep these gouges are, but at night, what would they look like? At night, would you overestimate how deep they were and be less inclined to want to swerve into what you think is a pothole? Because that's the key thing. You really want to drive this road at night because that's when this happened. And if you go further along this road, there are areas that have been filled in, where this road definitely was damaged and has been filled in. So that's the other thing is if you're driving with a trailer or a heavy weight behind you on a curve and the road's going up and down, and it's sort of bumpy, could that cause instability in your vehicle? And you see it's quite a significant um, hole in the road. So these were just a couple of shots I took of that. Look how deep that hole is. I mean, this is after that has happened. So I was just trying to record some of the surface conditions of the road. And the thing that's a bit deceiving with these cat eyes is it's showing you the road's going in a particular direction, but then it turns. There you can see how the holes have been filled in with tar, but then are crumbling regardless, right? So these are all sections where it's strange, it's the center of the road that is falling apart, not the sides of it so much. So this is something I found on the side of the road. What is that? What do you see in the picture? Rich buddy, good to see you. That's right. That's also important, is that the double line is saying you can't go to the left of the road. Isn't that what the line is saying? So why do you think there's an energy drink right on the side of this road? Why do you think that's... I didn't put it there. Why do you think there's an energy drink? There's where my car's parked. What's this energy drink doing here? What's an energy drink doing along the side of the road? Okay, besides litter, why do you think there is this particular energy drink by the side of the road? That's what I think. And if someone, and I don't think the perpetrator or the driver, I don't think the driver threw out this can and it's been there for whatever number of years, right? But the point is that it seems like someone who was driving here was sleepy. And so the question is, couldn't it just have been someone else who was sleepy as well? They were drinking this drink to stay awake. And so was someone driving on this road at 3 o'clock in the morning? That's the most important bit of evidence we've got in the whole thing. That this happened really late at night. What happens really late at night? Drivers become drowsy. And did a drowsy driver on a corner not stick to his lane? Simple as that. Did a driver on this road with no lights um, turn late on a kind of a road that he didn't expect to turn? Because it is a strangely subtle turn. The other thing is, it comes, if you're coming from the direction that he was coming from, you're coming from a dip. You're coming from lower down, not higher up, lower down to higher up. And as a result, that corner is going to steal on you. It's going to be a sudden realization, oh, there's a corner here. And because you're sleepy, he could even have been on his phone. Because you're sleepy, you react 1 second slower or whatever it is. And then what happens? And that's not what I'm saying isn't like some kind of uh, extravagant alien conspiracy theory. This happens every single day on the roads all around the world. Someone isn't concentrating, the driver is not concentrating, the driver is tired, especially at 3 o'clock in the morning, the driver is drowsy, and the driver strays, and someone happens to be walking on the road. They're not supposed to be there either, and then something happens. It could also be a drunk driver. Well, I'm one of those people. In fact, I've been drinking. In fact, I drank a Red Bull when I was with Laurie, and I couldn't stay awake. I bought a Red Bull. Um, is there anyone else here who does that? Is there anyone else who drinks Red Bull to stay awake? Someone says, looks quite a ways off the road, good thrower. Well, if the car was going quite fast, maybe. Anyway, so now it's getting quite dark in these pictures. The point I just want to show you here, that's where uh, the line crosses the road, and I've always wondered whether this created some kind of like mental signal where someone was kind of following these lines, it's like in a subconscious way. because you don't expect the lines to cross the road, right? And instead the road turns here and the lines are now on that side, and that's also exactly where the accident happened, right there. There again, you can see that's where the line is crossing the road. So was some driver drowsy and sort of hypnotized? We're sort of following the lines above the road in a way. And remember, that's being illuminated by the headlights as well. Is that what's going on? Not only that, but the poles along the side of the road as well. So anyway, for what it's worth, that's my visit to that part of South Carolina. We at 3 hours 10 minutes. You guys want me to deal with the beach, Mallory Beach crash here, or in a separate analysis? Do some of you want to go to bed? I mean, it's 20 to 2 in the morning where I am. Suzanne says no Red Bull for me. Paik, I have actually expressed my opinion previously on this, and it was the same weeks ago. So it's not really new. Silent Murmur says many people who drink alcohol drink Red Bull as well. Yeah. Sonia says 10:40 here. Okay. Janine says just put on some coffee. I'm game. Okay. Lauren says separate. I want to sleep. That's how wide that little strip of road is. Just go back there. Mel says, can we have it in a separate analysis? So there are two cars passing one another. Again, can you see how narrow that road is? Another possibility is that two cars were passing one another when Stephen Smith was struck. And perhaps one was too far on one side of the road and the other one made extra room. Who knows? But you'd expect if that happened, there would be marks in the grass, and there weren't. So I don't know if you've noticed from the photos I've taken just how much traffic was going down this road. Like, I was just walking around taking photos, and there was just cars constantly coming up and down this road, constantly. So although this is quite a narrow almost, what's the word, just a kind of a rural little road. It's quite a busy little road as well. Anyway, whatever the truth of this case is, it's good news that it's being investigated, and hopefully we are going to have a situation where it's going to be resolved ultimately. I think if they do a reenactment, a recreation of what happened, then that's one way of figuring it out, right? So these were the very last photos. You can see I stayed there until kind of after dark, just getting a sense of what does it look like at night. I don't think I've got the last few photos. What's Oh, that's the hotel. Sure. Not actually sure where those photos are. They're on my other phone. Let me just check. Yeah, I actually think the photos that I need are on this phone. Wonder if I can quickly send them to myself. So it's the photos where his it's a photo where his vehicle. It's a photo where so yeah, they are. So let's just see if I can email them to myself, and then I'll show them to you. So it's the last two photos of where Stephen Smith's vehicle seemed to break down, and I'm going to stop the live stream there. So that's the one. Got a couple here. So let me, while I'm doing this, let me ask you guys a question. Do you think Stephen Smith's vehicle was facing in the direction that he ended up apparently walking in, or was it facing away? Was he basically heading somewhere else? What do you think the answer is? What do you think the answer is? So this is the last thing we're going to deal with in this analysis. After this point, I then drove to Crocketville, and then from Crocketville, not much further, about a mile or so, to um, the point where his yellow Chevy Aveo, 2013 Aveo, I think, was found. Was that vehicle found pointing in the direction that he was ultimately sort of walking in? In other words, he had to walk towards Crocketville and then turn there and walk up this road. Or was it facing as though he was driving away and then that he walked in the opposite direction? What do you guys say? Southern Member says a lumber truck couldn't or could have been trying to get an early start to avoid traffic. Log trucks are some of the most difficult types of heavy trucks to drive. Good point. Laura says facing towards his home, was he not headed there when walking? Well, it depends on what you mean by home. Facing towards where his father lived, I guess is what you mean. Christina says, I'm not sold that he was hit. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to just explain to you what I saw when these pictures come through. So try and follow what I'm going to say now. When I drove to where his vehicle was found, I do I had to make a U-turn at this point, right? I had to make a U-turn. So I'm driving now in the opposite direction to the direction you'd expect him to be driving if his car didn't break down, right? So I'm driving now away from the cross. I'm on the right-hand side of the road, right? Driving towards Crocketville. Then I turned left, and then I continued driving on the right-hand side of the road. And I'm going away from this incident site. Do you think where Stephen's vehicle was found was on the right-hand side, in other words, the direction that I'm going in, just off that, or on the left-hand side? What do you think the answer is? What do you guys say? So this is the spot where his vehicle broke down. Do you think that is on the same side of the road that I'm driving in as I'm going away from the cross, the site of the incident? What do you think? So Christina says on the right. Wolfie says on the right. Brooke says on the right. Oh, nice, Matt says, look how wide the shoulder is where his vehicle was parked. That's not normal. What a lucky break. Wolfie says, no, it is the opposite side that you were driving. Okay. Silent Murmur says, not sure. Gloria says his car was facing away from the incident. Iceland, good to see you, says, I feel a bit behind, but I think right as well. Sally says, can I phone a friend? No. Yes, I want to show you another picture. This is the view from inside my vehicle of that scene. Do you, first of all, do you agree that that's the right, I've got the right place here? Do you agree that, sorry about that, do you agree that this is the right spot? Wolfie says, I think it's just facing towards the incident. Erica says away. Erica says the right hand side. Lex Luther says the opposite direction. Okay. Lex Luther says, what side of the road was the Red Bull can found? Well, if you're driving back, the left hand side. Hold on. Yeah, if you're driving back, the left hand side. Okay, so I'm going to show you one more photo, then I'm going to give you the answer. This is just right in front. And you're welcome to go and check the pictures I'm showing you with the pictures. I mean, there's some side views as well. And so you're welcome to go and check that. But I measured the distance. Anyway, I'm pretty confident that it is correct. So I can tell you the following. When I drove, so I'm driving away from the incident site, right? I had to make a U-turn in order to be on this side of the road where his car broke down. In other words, it broke down on the, I guess, the left side, right? And if you're driving away, right? If you're driving away, it's the left side, which is why you've got to make a U-turn to come back. And so it does, to me, make sense that his car stopped for whatever reason, ran out of fuel, battery didn't work, electrical, this or that, stopped, and he thought, well, dang, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. My father's house is just around the corner. I'm 19 years old. I'm fit. I've got good shoes. I'm going to just walk home. And he was almost there. He was less than, I think, something like less than a mile from home when he died, right? and Crocketville was basically closed at that time of the morning. It's a very small little town. It's basically 3 or 4 buildings. And so I think he just wanted to go home, leave his car there, maybe actually open the gas thing to indicate to someone who is passing by, well, that there's no gas in this vehicle if you want to steal it. Maybe that's just what he was trying to communicate. And anyway, and so all he wanted to do was go home, get into bed and sleep, get some sleep, and then he would sort his car out the next day. And maybe part of that psychology was he didn't want to wake his sister up again. It bothered her, or it asked for her help previously, which he'd come out and helped him because he had engine trouble. It doesn't stand to reason that he had engine trouble again, car trouble again. It had engine trouble pretty much not the same day, because this was like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, but basically the same day, within about 24, 26, 27 hours. So if he just had car trouble, what didn't he just have car trouble again? And so he parked his car, and then and it is facing the direction that he ended up walking in, and then he walked the way that he walked. And can you see how uneven the road is in this picture? Sorry, the grass. The grass is quite long. I mean, I was even afraid to drive my car on the grass leading up to this piece of tar. The grass was pretty long, um, and that's here. That's where this is. So anyway, I hope that you've learned something by us going to the scene. I hope that me going there has helped you, whatever you believe happened, has helped you understand at least the geography and the geometries and all that kind of thing. Has it? I hope so. Yeah, Brooke says, kids that age out drinking late at night, driving country roads, seen it, done it. That's right. That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. It's also a good point. Wendy says, I used to drink Red Bulls in college when I had a huge paper to write, but cannot handle that much caffeine anymore at my present age. I always know I'm in serious trouble when I have to stay awake and I drink a Red Bull and my alert levels don't change. Then I know I'm in like serious shutdown mode. Like nothing is going to help me. You have to sleep. So we'll deal with the Mallory Beach thing separately. I might do a little edited video, or I might do a shorter live, like basically, I don't know, half hour, 45-minute live, maybe tomorrow. I think tomorrow I'm having dinner tomorrow night and the night after with sort of friends of the channel, and so I can't say for sure that I'll be back on time, but I think I don't think we're going to be going like partying until the early hours of the night. I really doubt it. So possibly I'll be dealing with the Mallory Beach scene and the incident this time tomorrow. So look out for that. Yes, so the answer is the car was facing the incident. Why did he leave his wallet? It's a good question. It's a fantastic question. I don't know whether he knew that he left his wallet. Like his wallet was found between the vehicle seat and the door. So it could be that he um, actually couldn't find his wallet. It was dark. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Maybe even assumed that he'd lost it or something like that. Um, yeah. Um, Maybe that's the mistake that he made, that he left his wallet. It is a good question though. Wendy says it's super helpful now. I can visualize this. Okay. Beverly says most people would have stopped and got help. Thanks a lot, Wolfie. I appreciate it. Thanks, Elise. Thanks, guys. Am I? Uh, Shamey Cake says you're popular, incredibly popular. Yeah, well, it's a possibility. Wendy says, I loved your video of the trip to the lighthouse. Awesome. Chelsea says you should enjoy the last few nights here, party it up. So I must say, I'm just going to end off with this. I had an incredibly awesome trip to the Statue of Liberty. I walked from Midtown Manhattan to the south, I think it's called the South Ferry, and then from there caught a ferry to, and it was just there'd been a big thunderstorm, and there was talk that we might not even go out, and then the thunder clouds were cleared, and once again you had this beautiful golden light shining on the buildings, and I'm gonna be putting some of that on Instagram, so check that out. It definitely was quite special, just quite a special thing. I kind of met some, excuse me, I met some German mother and daughter, and we had quite a cool chat. So it was actually quite a fun excursion. Jasmine says, please stay safe during your travels. Jasmine, my travels are only another, I'm leaving America on Monday. Don says he was afraid to stay in his car. Someone had already come by. It's a pleasure, Linda. Pleasure. Uh, Bobby Vacation says this was great. Thanks for giving us a better perspective. Upcoming dinners, I get that. Southside Seaport, that's it. I would have liked to have gone on the beach. That's like a green boat. Would have liked to have gone. Kombucha, okay. Thanks a lot, guys. Erica said, I can't express how much I appreciate your visiting these sites. Very grateful. Oh, and low key jealous. Okay, cool. Okay, guys. Gloria said, I guess my parents saw the Statue of Liberty when they came to the USA. Thanks a lot, Iceland. Cool. So thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for joining me here. I just want to just again express my appreciation for those who left super chats and those who were here for the whole, what's it, 3 hours, 30 minutes, quite a long live. I'm hoping to do a Van Gogh letters before I leave New York, so that might be either Monday morning or Sunday night. So maybe Sunday night. Time is running out. Anyway, I hope you found this useful. And again, just thanks everybody. And if you're watching this on replay, bear in mind you can hit the thanks button. Take care, guys. Have a good sleep, sweet dreams. Check out my Instagram for some of the latest photos from today. Okay, all the best. Take care. Ciao.